Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. So before we jump into our article today, just a few things about what to expect in the upcoming month. So I talked to you folks recently about how I was going to start adding some more video to the podcast. And now that the weather has begun to break here in Las Vegas, that is most certainly about to occur. I didn't want to do videos from sitting inside the office with a bunch of books behind me or some green screen or some other, basic ass generic type of setting. I wanted it to be a little bit more unique, and I wanted to be able to incorporate it with my adventures. So what I'll do is when I'm approaching a mountain to climb or when I'm out on a long through hike or a backpack or whatever I might be doing, I'm going to take the time to sit down and record 1 or 2 videos a week to go along with the podcasts that we do every single day. That way we can do, maybe it'll be like a wrap-up video or one in the middle of the week, maybe like on Wednesday, and then one wrap-up video on Sunday, something like that. But as the weather begins to break here in Las Vegas, I plan on getting out there and being on the trail pretty much every day. So I'm going to try and chew gum and walk at the same time and incorporate the podcast into my adventures. That way, everything fits nicely. Because as much time as I've been spending on the podcast, I have to make sure that I still have some time to get out there into the mountains and get my head clear, right? So it makes good sense for me to be able to record some episodes while I'm also out there adventuring. And it gives you folks a little bit of an idea and a peek into what's going on and how I prepare for these shows every day. So, everybody has their own practices, right, before they create content or before they do whatever it is they're doing. And for me, I like to go to the mountains and climb and get my mind right. So we're going to incorporate a whole bunch of that moving forward as this weather has begun to break. So you definitely have that to look forward to. And also, I have wrapped up episode 1 of my new project. I was talking to you all about it a little bit, but I'm doing a new project that has to do with unexplained disappearances and unsolved murders. And the first case we're going to be looking at is the West Mesa Bone Collector. So I'm looking at a 6-part series, roughly 6 parts on the West Mesa Bone Collector. And I did the draft episode recently. So I'm going to go back, check it out, have some of my testers give it a listen, see what they think about it. And the plan is to have the whole 6-part series ready to go in October. When in October? That's to be determined, but definitely in October. So be on the lookout for that. I'll keep you all up to date on that. And I have received some emails about that project, and it is it's a harrowing tale, no doubt about it. If you're not familiar with the West Mesa Bone Collector, go ahead and do yourself a favor and Google the case. It's pretty disturbing. All right, so today, our article is from the Daily Mail. And the headline, "If Charles Manson can get a fair trial, so can Ghislaine Maxwell. Lawyers for Virginia Roberts reject claim by Epstein's co-conspirator that releasing documents would wreck her trial." And I love it. Why not call her Charles Manson or compare her to Charles Manson? And they're right. Charles Manson got a fair trial. So what makes anyone think that Ghislaine Maxwell isn't going to get a fair trial? Now, I'm sure everybody has heard about Ghislaine Maxwell at this point and her alleged involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. But that doesn't mean everybody is digging into the case and all these potential jurors are polluted. I mean, come on. That's absolutely ludicrous. She has such a grandiose view of herself that it's not even funny. This article is from the Daily Mail, and the author is Tim Stickings. If notorious killer Charles Manson can get a fair trial, then so can Ghislaine Maxwell, lawyers for her accuser Virginia Roberts have said. Robert's lawyers rejected Maxwell's claim that releasing a trove of documents from their 2016 lawsuit would lead to a storm of negative publicity and prejudice her trial. Look, it doesn't matter what else is released at this point. Everybody understands what Ghislaine Maxwell was with Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody understands. Any one of these jurors, all they would have to do is Google Ghislaine Maxwell's name, and they would see everything that they could possibly want to see about this disgusting lady. The whole, she's not going to get a fair trial, is just more movement from her lawyers. More shuck and jiving from her lawyers. They're trying to slow things down. Maxwell last month pleaded with judges not to let the cat out of the bag by unsealing the documents after she denied charges of helping Jeffrey Epstein to recruit and abuse young girls. I have breaking news for Ghislaine Maxwell and her high-profile lawyers. The cat is out of the bag, okay? It's not going back. Pandora's box has been opened, and everybody has had a look inside to see the kind of bipedal serpent your client is. But Robert's lawyers wrote in a Wednesday court filing, other high-profile cases where courts successfully managed extensive pretrial publicity and rejected defendants' arguments that it compromised their right to a fair trial include the trials of Al-Qaeda affiliate Khalid al-Fawaz, labor union leader Jimmy Hoffa, and murderer and cult leader Charles Manson. Boy, that is some distinguished company to be in, huh, Ghislaine? In there with Mr. Fawaz, Charles Manson, Jimmy Hoffa. When Jimmy Hoffa is the least of the scumbags that you're being rolled in with, well, you're probably a pretty big scumbag yourself. And they're not wrong. Virginia's lawyers most certainly are not wrong about this. If these people all received fair trials, so will Ghislaine, okay? Quoting from a ruling in the Manson case, which ended with the killer being sentenced to life in prison in 1972, Robert's lawyers said that massive pretrial publicity does not automatically translate into prejudice. And it doesn't, right? We know there's some sick people out there. We know that some people might believe Ghislaine Maxwell. We certainly know that there's some wacky-ass weird people who believe Prince Andrew. So there's definitely some people out there who probably believe Ghislaine Maxwell. It's up to the lawyers to go through the jury pool and find the people that best fit the case. That's their job. To come out right away and talk about how the jury pool is tainted and Ghislaine's not going to get a fair trial is just more of the nonsense. More of the, we have critical new information that has a bearing on the case and we have to make sure that we let you know about it. It's more of that shit from these people. And like I said, expect a lot more of it. As this moves forward, and they keep getting busted in the proverbial eye, they're going to keep trying to maneuver. They're going to keep trying to jump through loopholes. Look for technicalities. They're not going to try and win on the merits of their client's innocence. They're going to try and win on technicalities. Maxwell's deposition was taken in April 2016 for a now settled defamation case brought by Roberts, who alleges that Epstein kept her as a sex slave with Maxwell's assistance. A U.S. district judge ordered the deposition to be released earlier this year, and some of the documents were published on July 30th. And as you know, the Court of Appeals is looking at the depositions as we speak, and in 12 days from now, September 22nd, they will convene and we will find out more about those sealed documents and if we're going to get ourselves a peek. They included emails between Epstein and Maxwell, who were identified respectively as Jeffrey E. and either G. Max or G. Maxwell. G. Max, what is that? Her hip-hop name? G-Max, give me a break. Other unsealed materials include emails from Roberts to the FBI in 2014 in which she expressed an interest in pursuing a case against Epstein. But other documents remain hidden after Maxwell filed an emergency motion to block their release, and her lawyers are now seeking to overturn the lower court's decision. Now, again, we're talking about the Second Court of Appeals, the same court that released the first 2,000 pages of the Epstein dump. So when you look at all of the evidence that we have before us, how they've conducted themselves in the past, and what they are usually about, you would think that the Second Court of Appeals is going to deny the motion to keep this stuff sealed and order it to be unsealed. But again, when we're dealing with the courts in this country especially, I remain skeptical. Opposing Maxwell's motion, Roberts' lawyers said in a 51-page filing that there was no basis for her speculative fear and bad publicity would prejudice the jury. Cases where negative coverage has mattered have typically occurred in small communities and not in large cities such as New York, they say. Well, that is true. There is a huge, varied juror pool that they can draw from. If they can't find proper jurors in New York City that they think are fair and impartial, then they're not going to be able to find them anywhere. The size and heterogeneity of such communities make it unlikely that even the most sensational case will become a cause célèbre where the whole community becomes interested in all the morbid details, lawyers Sigrid McCauley and David Boies said. And I agree with that to some extent. I don't think that the Ghislaine Maxwell part of this case is going to have the whole country on edge the way that maybe the Jeffrey Epstein case would have been. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that this case has gained in popularity recently, and as the legacy media lets little bits out about what has occurred, more people are interested, but the legacy media has a vested interest in keeping this case under wraps. Remember, they don't want their faves exposed. They don't want to give any sort of ammunition to their so-called enemies on the other side. So instead, they'd rather just keep this stuff from the public domain. And we've seen that over and over with the legacy media. I mean, the most glaring example that we can look at right now in recent memory is with ABC and Amy Robach. Maxwell's vague argument about privacy interests cannot justify total closure of the deposition materials, they said. Invoking the Manson case, they told the Manhattan Appeals Court that the fact that a case receives enormous publicity does not itself establish error. And again, they're speaking to the appeals court on this. The same appeals court that looked at the Jeffrey Epstein request to keep the documents sealed and laughed and went on and released it. So I think that Maxwell and her team, they're going to have to come correct. They're going to have to come strong here. Or else there's zero chance that this appeals court is going to give them what they want and keep these documents sealed. Manson was found guilty in 1996 of ordering his followers to carry out 7 murders in one of the 20th century's most notorious crime sprees. Manson was sentenced to death, but this was commuted to life in prison after California abolished capital punishment in 1972. He died in 2017. You want to look at something very, very, very interesting? Do yourself a favor and just type in MK Ultra Charles Manson to whatever search engine you like to use and take a look at that crazy nonsense. The lawyers also pointed to the case of Khalid al-Fawaz, who was sentenced to life in prison 5 years ago in connection with the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. Prosecutors said he was Osama bin Laden's bridge to the West, disseminating the terror leader's violent messages in London. And that's for a whole different conversation. I could go all day about al-Fawaz and that whole entire situation in Kenya and Tanzania, but let's just say that Al Fawaz is a pretty scummy individual, and if he got a fair trial, then Maxwell most assuredly will. Roberts has been one of Epstein's most visible accusers, and her lawyers have said the public has a right to see Maxwell's deposition. Maxwell has said her deposition contained intimate, sensitive, and personal information, and whose release would cause irreversible negative publicity, as if she could get any more negative publicity. All right? You are being charged with abusing children, okay? Facilitating trafficking, being involved in one of the world's largest trafficking rings, and you're worried about more negative publicity? We call that context, Ghislaine. Her lawyer said this would undermine her constitutional rights to remain silent and obtain a fair trial by impartial jury. Well, you have the right to remain silent. It doesn't mean you have to evoke that right. If you're so innocent, why are you trying to stay silent anyway? Maxwell, 58, has pleaded not guilty to helping Epstein recruit and eventually abuse 3 girls from 1994 to 1997. She also denies committing perjury by denying her involvement with the late financier, pedophile, under oath. And we know, so she perjures herself in the deposition and then she lies about lying. I wonder if this lady has ever told the truth ever once in her whole entire life. Her trial is scheduled for next July. She was arrested in New Hampshire on July 2nd and is being held in a Brooklyn jail after a judge deemed she was a flight risk. A grand jury returned a sealed 6-count indictment against Maxwell on June 29th, almost a year after Epstein was charged. And we know that she's being held as a flight risk because of all of the circumstances surrounding it. Passport to France, the means, the connections, and all the other jazz that goes into it. It alleges that Maxwell groomed 3 unnamed girls, all under the age of 18, in London, New York, Florida, and New Mexico between 1994 and 1997. She is accused of having befriended them by taking them to the movies or on shopping sprees and normalized abusive behavior by getting undressed in front of them. That's kind of a basic explanation. What they looked for were girls who were in situations that, were homes that were broken, girls who were, poor, had parents who might have had drug problems, stuff like that. That was the main thing that they looked for, girls who were vulnerable. And once they were vulnerable, all the other stuff occurred. Once they recognized that these girls were vulnerable, the other stuff occurred. The grooming, the procuring, the normalization of this behavior. Maxwell's lawyers have tried to distance their client from Epstein, saying she had no contact with him for more than a decade. We know that's a lie. We saw the email. Epstein killed himself at age 66 in August 2019 at a federal jail in Manhattan while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Allegedly. He had previously pleaded guilty in 2008 to a Florida state prostitution charge and completed a 13-month jail sentence, now widely considered too lenient. Now widely considered? It wasn't considered lenient then? Of course it was. And once again, nobody gave a shit. Turn the other cheek. Who cares? It's just another rich guy. He'll buy his way out of this. Before Epstein's conviction, he and Maxwell had a network of powerful friends, including Prince Andrew, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton. Roberts claims that she had sex with Andrew in the early 2000s. He denies this. And I think it's a pretty funny comparison, right? The headline cracked me up. Ghislaine Maxwell compared to Charles Manson. All right, I'm on board. I find her to be reprehensible as hell. I find her to be absolutely disgusting and on the same plane as people like that, to be honest with you. So it's not that far off in comparisons, in my opinion. But what it goes to show you is that Ghislaine Maxwell and her lawyers are going to attempt to do anything in their power to make sure that this case drags out, to make sure that they have more time to try and find some sort of exposed point in the prosecution's arguments. And when you start to unpeel the layers and you start to really dig into what Ghislaine Maxwell is, was, and always will be, in my opinion, you cannot come away without looking at her as a vital piece to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise and also one of the bosses. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links and the link to the GoFundMe can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I'll be back later on.